You think you know who the heroes and villains of history are. But what if the monster was democratically elected and the hero held racist views? Today we're breaking down the 3 most loved and 3 most hated figures in history. And by the end, you might question everything you thought you knew. Let's start with pure evil, because some people really deserve the hatred. The most hated. Adolf Hitler, the elected monster. Here's what textbooks don't tell you. Hitler was Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1938. Germans didn't vote for a monster in 1933. They voted for a guy promising to make Germany great again after World War I's humiliation. 6 million Jews, 5 million more Romani, disabled, homosexuals, Slavs, political prisoners. The Holocaust wasn't a byproduct of war. It was the entire point. Industrial-scale murder with German efficiency. But here's what makes Hitler uniquely terrifying. He convinced an entire nation that genocide was necessary. Children reported their own parents. Scientists created pseudoscience to justify racial hierarchy. Normal people became killers, and they did it believing they were heroes. World War II killed 70 to 85 million people. Every death traces back to one man's ambition and hatred. That's why 80 years later, we're still fighting his ideology. But if Hitler was evil on the world stage, this next guy committed genocide in the shadows. And you've probably never even heard his name. King Leopold II, the butcher Belgium erased. Between 1885 and 1908, King Leopold personally owned the Congo. Not his country, his personal property, 76 times larger than Belgium. He told the world he was bringing civilization to Africa. He brought hell. His private army enforced rubber quotas by cutting off hands. Men, women, children, it didn't matter. The severed hands became currency, soldiers proving they'd used bullets on people, not hunting. When villages didn't meet quotas, entire communities were massacred as examples. 10 to 15 million dead. Half the Congo's population wiped out in 23 years, so Leopold could build monuments in Brussels and live like a Renaissance prince. Here's the sickest part. He pulled it off. He convinced the world he was a humanitarian while literally cutting hands off children. When the truth leaked, he destroyed evidence, blamed subordinates, and when forced to hand over the Congo, he got paid compensation for his loss. He died in 1909, wealthy and honored, with a state funeral. Belgium didn't formally apologize until 2020. Why do we learn about Hitler in school but not Leopold? Drop your theory in the comments. And while Leopold hid his evil with propaganda, our next dictator used paranoia to justify his. Joseph Stalin, the paranoid executioner. Stalin's death count? Somewhere between 6 and 20 million. The range exists because he was so good at making people disappear. We literally don't know. Stalin deliberately starved Ukraine, confiscated grain, blocked food aid. 3.5 to 5 million dead. People were so desperate they resorted to cannibalism. This wasn't incompetence. It was a policy to crush Ukrainian independence. The Great Purge, 1936 to 38. Stalin signed execution lists over dinner. 383 lists, 44,000 names, approved them all. You could be executed for telling a joke, for not clapping long enough, for nothing. When his military commanders warned that purging officers would leave the USSR vulnerable, he had them shot. When Hitler invaded, millions of Soviet soldiers died because Stalin's paranoia had crippled the Red Army. He died in 1953, lying in his own urine, because his bodyguards were too terrified to check on him without permission. That's his legacy. A dictator so feared, people let him die rather than risk helping. Now let's flip the script. We know why we hate them, but the people we love, that's where things get complicated. The most loved, Mahatma Gandhi, the flawed saint. A 61-year-old man in simple cloth walked 240 miles to make salt. Britain had made it illegal, forcing Indians to buy it at inflated prices. Gandhi picked up a handful from the beach, breaking the law on camera. That single act helped burn down the British Empire. For 30 years, Gandhi fought the most powerful empire on earth using non-violence. When soldiers beat protesters, he told them not to fight back. When violence erupted, he'd fast until it stopped, willing to die to prove his point. The British couldn't handle him. You can't shoot someone who won't fight back without looking like a monster. In 1947, India won independence. 400 million people freed, not through bloody revolution, but through strikes, marches, and civil disobedience. But here's what they don't teach. In South Africa, Gandhi didn't fight for all equality. He fought for Indians to be treated better than black Africans, whom he called savages. He believed in racial hierarchy, just a different one. He denied his dying wife medical treatment, saying it violated his principles, then accepted treatment when he got sick. He tested his celibacy by sleeping naked with young women, including his grandniece. Gandhi freed a nation. He also carried prejudices we now condemn. Both are true. I want your take. Does freeing 400 million people outweigh his personal failures? Comment below. Nelson Mandela, the terrorist who became a president. 27 years in cell, breaking rocks in a limestone quarry. The South African government arrested Mandela in 1962 for fighting apartheid, thinking they'd broken him. They were wrong. He emerged in 1990, not with rage, but reconciliation. When he won the presidency in 1994, he could have sought revenge. Instead, he created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Perpetrators could confess and receive amnesty. It prevented civil war. But here's what complicates the story. In the 1960s, Mandela founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the ANC's armed wing. He planned sabotage operations, bombings targeting infrastructure. The government called him a terrorist, and technically, he was guilty. Does fighting an oppressive regime with violence disqualify you from heroism? Or does context matter? Mandela himself never claimed to be perfect. That's why the world loved him, not because he was a saint, but because he was human and chose to be better. Winston Churchill, the necessary monster. May 1940. Nazi Germany controlled Europe. France had fallen. The British Army was trapped at Dunkirk. The logical move? Negotiate peace. Churchill had one word: and never. At 65, this political outcast became prime minister during Britain's darkest hour. His speeches became legend. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall never surrender. He walked through bombed London, cigar in mouth, V sign raised. His message: you can bomb us, but you can't break us. He convinced America to enter the war. He forged the alliance with Stalin. He made impossible decisions because he understood losing battles didn't mean losing the war. His refusal to surrender helped defeat Hitler. But here's the other side. While saving Europe, Churchill's policies caused the Bengal famine. 2 to 3 million Indians starved to death. He diverted food to British troops, prioritized stockpiles over lives. When officials begged for relief, he asked why Gandhi hadn't died yet and said Indians were breeding like rabbits. He saved democracy in Europe while holding deeply racist views about colonized people. He believed in racial hierarchy. He opposed Indian independence. He defended concentration camps in Kenya. So here's the question I'm pinning the best answer to. Does saving the world from Hitler justify starving millions in Bengal? Is Churchill a hero who did what was necessary, or a war criminal with good PR? Comment your answer. The uncomfortable truth: Hitler, Leopold, Stalin. Calculated cruelty, greed-driven genocide, paranoid mass murder. Gandhi, Mandela, Churchill. Non-violent resistance, reconciliation, unwavering courage. But the line isn't clean, is it? The loved figures held racist views, authorized violence, caused suffering. The hated figures had millions of supporters who genuinely loved them. Hitler was elected. Stalin was Uncle Joe to Allied propaganda. Leopold died honored. History isn't about perfect heroes versus pure villains. It's about what people do with power. We remember Gandhi, Mandela, and Churchill because, flawed as they were, they made the world better. We remember Hitler, Leopold, and Stalin as warnings of what happens when we embrace our worst instincts. History is still being written. Which side will you be on?